Christ International is well known in Kenya as life ministry. And let me just clarify the word life. Life does not really mean life. It means lay involvement for evangelism. L-I-F-E. Lay involvement for evangelism. And so the background is easy, that I can easily remember. It came earlier in 1970s by a missionary by the name Pat Pansaf, who came to Nairobi Chapel. He's the first person to come to Kenya and introduce Campus Crusade for Christ. It did not take a lot of root, but he started teaching a little bit of sharing and witnessing using the 4 spiritual laws as it were then. But 1971 really marks the really background for life ministry Kenya. This is when in Uganda there was a coup d'etat by Idi Amin. And Idi Amin kind of chased most of the Christians and the missionaries there.
And I want to promise you, this will be a government of action, not of words. Uganda oye! Uganda oye! Uganda oye!
And this led to the staff of Life Ministry Uganda to move from Uganda to come to Kenya. When they came to Kenya, they continued to do the ministry of winning, training in evangelism. I could say the Life Ministry Kenya was begun by the staff from Uganda. Thereafter, of course, other Kenya staff joined in, and I can recall people like Reverend Wellington Motiso, who were one of the pioneers, and there were other missionaries who came from the United States of America, from Europe, and they continued to do the ministry of Life Ministry Kenya. The ministry was then registered in 1973 officially by the government. And so that's why we are talking this year of 50th anniversary, or celebrating the 50 years of ministry here in Kenya. My involvement started all the way since 1978. I didn't join staff directly, but the Life Ministry was holding some weekend seminars. These weekend seminars were called Leadership Training Institute, or Leadership Training in Seminar, LTS or LTI. So I was recruited on by a person by Abraham Woga, who was one of the early staff. He used to work with the Kenya Railways and actually became a trainer in railway training school. So one day I met him and said, well, there's a training, a weekend training, I would like you to come. And that started my journey of being trained. And we went to, I think the training was in St. Andrews, and later on in every weekend was at St. Andrews or at All Saints. And we went witnessing at Central Park. And I got excited about witnessing, personal witnessing, talking to people on one-on-one, and this really began my journey on of Life Ministry Kenya. And thereafter, of course, the story 1986 is when I joined as full staff together with my wife Susan. So we joined not from university but from the marketplace. So since then, we have not looked back. The relationship between national staff as you call them, indigenous, and the expatriate staff who happened to be missionaries. It was cordial in one way or the other, but at the same time, there was a little bit of tension. And the tension is when it came on support raising, Life Ministry missionaries trust God to raise funds for their upkeeping. So here you are having two, I could call two classes of people. Those who came from outside, missionaries, expatriates, lived in good houses, in good places, they drove cars, while the national or indigenous, they trekked or they walked to their ministry places. Kind of it was segregative, but thank God that these things, as we continued, tension to subsidize. In fact, I need to mention here Arno Faboom, who was one of our staff from Netherlands, had to write a paper concerning the relationships between African and expatriate staff. In 1978 is when there was this a campaign called I Found It campaign, which literally meant nimepata in Kiswahili. And this continued, it was all globally done, as it were. And Kenya, it was very good because it exposed a number of people in witnessing and talking about Jesus Christ. So that was one of the climax of the organization in Kenya. Of course, thereafter there was many seminars, and I think this is when also later on that's when the Jesus film came into being, and we can assert to that Jesus film became a tool, very important tool, especially when it was translated into Kiswahili.
Mkiwapenda tu wale wanaowapenda ninyi, muonyesha fadhili gani? Kwa kuwa hata wenye dhambi wapenda wale wawapendao. Mkiwatendea mema wale tu wawatendeao mema, muonyesha fadhili gani? Hata wenye dhambi hufanya hivyo.
Anamgusaje?
Hawezaje kuongea naye?
Yachukiza.
La! Wapendeni adui zenu na watendeeni mema.
I remember when it came first in English, and I was involved in going to Kibera slums and showing it in English, but I was interpreting to Kiswahili. As the reel was rolling, I was also speaking in a low voice, and then I was speaking in Kiswahili. It was difficult for those hours just talking and all that, but now later on when the lip sync was done, it was great, and now we don't only talk about Kiswahili, but almost the major languages in Kenya, Jesus film has been translated into. So that was another big highlight. Together with my wife Susan, when we joined the ministry in 1980s, one of the things that the organization, and I remember Don Myers, who was the continental director, came to Life Ministry National Director then, Reverend Wellington Motiso, that he had been asked by some of the indigenous churches, and I remember that was Mount Sinai Church, one of the bishop, Agoi, that's his name. Agoi went to the Don Myers' office and said, I want you to teach me, I want you to train us. And he was in a regalia with the uniform, with a hat, a big hat. And so Don Myers did not know what to do, so he went to Wellington Motiso. And Wellington Motiso also said, okay, we'll see what to do. And then that's when I joined. I was at the training center. And so Wellington Motiso comes and says, you know, Mamboleo, George, we need to talk. What about it? I know you know about this spirit church, the spirit churches. So what do you mean by the spirit churches? And say, well, most of these African indigenous churches, yes, I do, because I was brought up in an area where, in Western Kenya, where I could interact with them. So, and I loved them because with their uniform, dancing and beating the drums and running along the road, I used to run with them anyway. So it was a joy in my youth. So when he told me about it, I said, no problem about it. We need to do something. How can we train them? He said, well, we can train them what we know. And to cut the story short, so even while I was in training before becoming full-time staff, I started going with the national director to Western Kenya, visiting the bishops, the leaders of those churches, African Divine Church, African Israel Nineveh Church, Pesa Church, and Holy Mountain Church, Church of the Holy Spirit, and many others. So we were visiting them, and we recruited them to come for a training. And the first conference of African indigenous churches was held at Kenyatta University. And that was the end of December 1986 to 2nd of 1987, January. Our 1990s, of course, the new life 2000 was born, and that's when we starting the New Life training centers. I was privileged to go to Manila with other African staff from other countries, and we got the training. I remember the first NLTC was done in Kenya, in Meru, with an indigenous church. African Sinai Mission by Bishop Solomon Ngura, the late. That was the first New Life Training Center in Kenya. And we experimented it, and it was a good curriculum, and we started training people. And the NLTC, I think, became one of the backbone of all our strategies. So we used to have what we call 3 C's. The 3 C's meant campus, community, and coverage. Campus is today called SLM. The community is now called leader-led, and the coverage is what we call global church. And so it's the same thing, but we had those 3 main emphases in our ministry in Kenya and globally. After I came out of the leadership as a national director, there was Eric Wafuko, who took over from me, and thereafter there was Ruben Zuki, there was Timothy Mwangi, there was the late Ken Stravins, and Kanyingi, and thereafter now we have Arnold Zoba. Arnold, when he joined right from the university, he came to the office as information manager because he knew a little bit of the computer, and I needed somebody, or we needed somebody in the office to help us and technology. And so I even sponsored him to get back to school to do IT. And straight from university, straight to leadership. I brought him to the leadership team. And as a young man, he said, well, I don't have experience. As experience, you learn as you go. And I'm glad he took that, and he was not scared or not afraid of taking up the leadership. And I've seen him grow in his area of leadership. The Silver Jubilee was one of the milestones in Life Ministry Kenya, I can say that. We went out doing a lot of outreaches all over the country, showing the Jesus film, doing crusade for that matter in many other parts. But the climax, we also did dinners and breakfast to reach out to the community. That time we used to what we used to call executive ministries, which is now leader-led. And the climax for that is the walk along Uhuru Highway all the way to Uhuru Park. And we had the crusade, Reverend current Bishop George from Eldoret was the main speaker. And we had many artists of the music. We had our own in live ministry, Hallelujah Band, which was led by Boame Walmona, who is now in Europe, I think in Norway. And it was great, and that really brought the understanding that we were of age and we were growing, and I'm glad today we are 50 years old. We had a vision of building staff houses. That was the vision before by my predecessor. That from my former director, Wellington Motiso, and I also came up and said, well, we need to have staff houses. But later we changed from staff housing to office, and I believe that was one of the great achievements that live ministers are home. Other than what I mentioned under those 3 C's of campus, community, and coverage, there are many other things that, or other strategies that we employed. For example, there was what we used to call community health evangelism. This is where we taught the communities in the villages or elsewhere on how they can live a healthy life, and that was tied to the gospel. So people came to the seminars on how to be taught on how to live, how to stop or to avoid, or let me say prevention. And I think the prevention was better than cure. That's what they used to say. So there were several seminars and staff who were involved that in community health evangelism. And we saw that opening the work into the real villages. And I remember the area like Litain in Kericho. That is one of the areas where we had the community evangelism. There was another community health evangelism in Tana River. Apparently, we don't have much going on right now, but I think I'm glad we are opening an office there. But there was community health evangelism there. Garissa was much of the community evangelism, and many other places. We had even, I didn't mention this, but even teachers in areas like Machakos, we had teachers who were teaching there. And so there are many areas we got involved in helping people. Military ministry is one of those areas that we did, that was there. So we used to have children ministry in primary schools. We used to have music ministry, as I've already mentioned, Boame Walmona. So we had several strategies. All we wanted is to reach out and make disciples for Jesus Christ.
Mimi Mwai Kibaki.
Live ministry is not a political arm, nor do we subscribe to be political, nor do we tend to take sides. So that's a good part of our non-committal to either side. But one thing is clear, during those time, Zemoi, the conducive of environment, we had that freedom, that environment enabled us to reach every corner of this country. So I'm sure that was a great opportunity, and that's where we experienced a lot of growth, and we got a lot of support, both from the government and so forth. And the change to Mwai Kibaki, apparently I wasn't around. I was already gone out of the country as a missionary, so I may not speak much, but since I'm a Kenyan, it seems all well, and we received well. We did not have any problem to date. So Live Ministry still enjoys that opportunity to serve and to witness and to be a body in the church of the body of Christ in Kenya. So changes will come politically, but our vision does not change. Post-election, which happened, Life Minister was involved. In fact, we were involved in reconciliation. We did bring pastors together in areas like Kisumu, and we tried to bring that unity. The national team leader then was able to organize those, and we sponsored what we call reconciliation and helping people to have hope even despite all those things. So Life Ministry in Kenya has been part and parcel of bringing change and really change in the community. Life Ministry cannot make it alone. The success, the milestones that have been achieved is not because Life Ministry did it. It is through partnership of other like-minded organizations and individuals. And you partnering with the organization makes a big difference. So, ECHO partners. In the next 10 years and even many years, we plan 10 years, 5 years, or 1 year and so forth. But all I can say is to do more. Let's not stop. Let's not be satisfied for what we have been able to do, is to do more. If you asked me, we'll do more winning, more building, more training, and more sending. So nothing will change really, but let us put more effort. Even on the strategic plan is to help us move ahead. But as we move ahead, let's not lose focus on the Great Commission.